Okay. I'd like to call our planning meeting to order. Acknowledge that the press and the public were duly notified in accordance with state law. I'd like to welcome new members, Scott Pierce and Wally Brown again. And I'd like to turn this over to Julia for our annual legal briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Brown and Mr. Pierce, have you guys ever been a member of any public body before?
No.
No? What about you, Scott?
No,
I swear I've seen you at meetings. I feel like you're part of the...
I've been at a few meetings, one or two.
Okay.
Dozen.
All right, so let me stick to the basics. So now that you're both members of a public body, you are going to be, as well as this entire body, subject to a few new laws. And one of them is the Freedom of Information Act. It's a state law. And a couple things that are going to be very important for you going forward is that with the Freedom of Information Act, you are subject to transparency with the public, meaning when you guys are in a public meeting, you are subject to open meeting rules. And how many members do we have in Planning Commission? 7? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So with 7 members, a quorum is 4. So if you are meeting with 3 other members of your commission, that would be considered a meeting that a notice to the public would be required for. So always keep that in mind. Try to avoid being in a setting where there is a quorum of your group, even if you're not discussing planning commission business. It may appear untoward in the public eye. So just keep that in mind. Always try to avoid having that kind of chance meeting, even if you run into each other in the grocery store, as one of the examples that I've been given before. So that's one thing. All of our meetings are recorded. They are open to the public. So also, please remember that you're also subject to, well, let me go back. With the Freedom of Information Act, there are a few things that you do not have to discuss in public, okay? That's when we go into something called an executive session. And usually we go into an executive session in these situations to get legal advice, to talk about contractual matters. We talk about personnel matters. Somebody's got an unruly dog.
Yeah, that's me. I have 2 of them, so.
Got it.
Carry on.
So just remember, when you're going into executive session, one of the key rules under state law is to make sure that you announce the reason that you're going into executive session with specificity is the catchword there. So make sure that you announce to the public that you are going into exec.
You see a mute button, Rick, on your program? Or on your phone? You can hit mute if you can.
See, Nicole, we never have problems with your cats.
All right, I got it.
Appear on screen. Okay, so when we're going into executive session, we need to announce with specificity the reason that we're going into executive session, and we need to have a motion, a second, and a vote to go into executive session. Once you are back in a private session like that, out of the eye of the public, you always want to make sure that you stay on topic to the point that you have voted to go into executive session for. You do not straw poll in executive session. You take no votes in executive session. And you'll notice too, when you come out of executive session, your chair will announce that no votes have been taken, no action has been taken, and it's for that specific reason, okay? Do you have any questions about Freedom of Information Act in that respect, quorums and executive sessions? Okay.
So,
Another thing you guys are going to be subject to now as members of a public body is something called the Public Records Act, okay? So that means anything that you generate by email, private message, document, fax, text is subject to the Public Records Retention Act. All right, so that means the public has the right to see that. If they send us a FOIA request asking for any emails among you Planning Commission members, I need you to provide that information to me. So always keep that in mind. If you are group texting or if you are writing group emails amongst your Planning Commission members about Planning Commission business, that would be subject to the Public Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act. So always keep that in a separate file. I generally encourage you guys not to communicate in that way because you're all using your own personal email addresses. I don't think you have Isla Palm's email addresses, do you? No?
Well, we did it one time and I don't think they're working anymore. So,
Okay,
They have used them on and off over the
yes.
years.
I got you. I mean, 9 times out of 10, guys, this is not a problem. But you know, worst case scenario is like the town of Mount Pleasant. If we get sued and a lawyer gets overly aggressive, he'll send a subpoena for all of your email communication and text messages. And those are the moments where I have to say, either provide it to me or hand me your phone or your computer and let me pull it up myself. And that's not the most fun, I can assure you. I don't want to do that in any of your computers or cell phones. So just keep that in mind. If you are communicating in that way, keep it in the folder so it's easily accessible. I doubt you guys have much traffic in that respect. So but that's something I want you to keep in the back of your mind, okay? Any questions about that? See,
Oh, all set.
this is nothing but good news, Scott, see? I'm just here to scare you guys
I'm
for
just
about
here
10
to
minutes.
sponge it all up. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's also talk about conflicts of interest real quick. We have something called a State Ethics Act. And if you guys, if there's any particular topic or issue that's in front of you that you have a financial interest in, or if a member of your family or even your roommate, it doesn't have to be a blood relative, has a financial interest in, we ask that you provide written notice to us as soon as you can. I mean, sometimes there are moments where you're in a meeting and you realize, oh gosh, wait a minute, I have a conflict here. I need to recuse myself. If you do recuse yourself, we'll give you a form that you submit later in writing, but I always need that on the record if you are going to recuse yourself on a specific issue. Yes, sir.
So you do have a question on that. I don't have any financial interests in any businesses or anything on the island here, but can you give us some examples of the difference between transacting with businesses on the island and conflict of interest with investments or things of that nature on the island? That might help, because it seems like a lot of the people that are involved in the government here are involved in local businesses. And which is great. It's just a matter of, can you give us an example of what a conflict would be?
Sure. If you frequent a restaurant, you're good friends with the people who own the restaurant, that does not amount to a conflict of interest unless you have a monetary investment in that restaurant. Or it's on land that you own and they're leasing it from you. Anything that could potentially put money in your pocket is.
So any zoning or anything that would impact the property that I would own on the island here would need to recuse yourself, or at least disclose it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think 9 times out of 10, and I'll tell you this right now, I can't encourage you to recuse yourself. That is your own personal decision. And once you do recuse yourself, you need to remove yourself from all discussion as well. So you physically remove yourself from the dais and sit out in the crowd until the vote is over, and then you can step back up. If you abstain
Okay.
from a vote, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say thank you. I think I thought you were done.
Oh, no, okay. If you abstain from a vote, you can participate in the discussion and all of that. It's just a little bit different. Recusal is specifically related to conflicts of interest when it comes to financial impact on a vote. Okay? Any questions on that?
And that would extend, I presume, to relatives and such?
Yes, it's very broad, the definition. It's even acquaintances. So, you have to be, you have to take a good hard look in situations like this.
Okay.
If you have any questions, you're always free to reach out to us at legal, and we're happy to work through any of that with you. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, also remember, sometimes it's hard in a small island like this, but we generally, because of your quasi-judicial nature in some respects, we don't encourage ex parte communication. A member of the community, and Doug, chime in here if I'm over, if this isn't correct, because this is how we operate at the town. If someone has something on the agenda that you're about to consider, and they're a friend or a neighbor, and they reach out to you, just keep in mind that that's generally not encouraged. I can't say that you shouldn't be doing that or you can't, but it's not encouraged to have ex parte conversations with someone who's scheduled to be in front of you prior to a vote.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would just say there have been instances throughout the years where, we get into a public meeting and an applicant will say, hey, I called Ben and talked to him about him. I told him this, that, and the other. and it just does not play out well. I mean, not that, so we have always said, if you have that conversation, just say, just notice you're going in that direction, and you just say, hey, I need to hear this with the group, so hold your comments until we're all together. And it, even if it just doesn't paint a rosy picture, if it appears that there's been communication behind the scenes before a case is heard.
Excellent. Thank you, Douglas. Anything else from you guys? Any questions on that? Okay. All right, let me just briefly touch on the the Tort Claims Act. With you guys now, as you're operating in a public body like this, you're a member of a public body, as long as you're operating within the scope of your duties as a planning commission member, meaning we've had some situations with municipalities where a developer is unhappy with a vote and they'll sue the town and they'll sue each individual planning commission member or BOZA member or town council member. Your actions through a vote of a legislative body like this protects you under the umbrella of the State Tort Claims Act, meaning we would provide a defense to you guys. And if there's any judgment rendered against you, as long as you're within that circle, would be covered by our state insurance fund. If you overreach, and meaning you step outside the circle of trust is what we like to say, meaning if you openly take to social media and defame someone who's got a topic on the agenda, things like that, which are not within the scope of your duties as a planning commission member, those could potentially expose you to personal liability. And so naturally, I don't think I have to tell you that, but try to avoid that at all costs, please, if you don't mind. But otherwise, if you are acting as a planning commission member with the body, you are covered under the Tort Claims Act and you're covered under the insurance of the city. Do you have any questions about that? Okay. All right, but Douglas, I think that's all I'm going to throw at them right now, unless you have something else you want me to chime in on.
No, I don't think so. I think that's
Okay.
good.
And like I said earlier, if you guys ever have any questions about anything on the agenda or any kind of conflict question, just please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you guys in any way, okay?
Okay, thank you,
William,
Jill.
what happened?
Thank you.
What happened to your beach, William? Dang.
I relocated.
Well, y'all enjoy the rest of your meeting. It's good seeing everybody.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
I'd just like to comment. That was good. That was very good. But I'd like to comment that normally at this point in time, we'd ask citizens if they have any comments they want to make, if we were live, if we were all in the same room. Obviously, we can't do that now, but there is a link where they could go in and make comment if they wanted to. So, and sometimes that gets to be the biggest part of the meeting. Other times it's over and done in no time at all, but every now and then we get a crowd. So just wanted to mention that. The other thing I wanted to mention before we approve the minutes, Doug, I sent you a little note. It was late, it was very late, but I was suggesting that we do the plan review at the end rather than at the beginning, because it could go very long and it could go over over our time. So,
I think that's a good idea, Rick.
okay, so do we need to make a motion to do that?
Yeah, motion to reorder the agenda and move E down to the end of the agenda.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
It passes. Okay, so we'll do that. Next thing, approval of minutes. Do we have a motion to approve prior meeting, May 12th meeting May 12th meeting minutes? Wow,
I'll
make a
also move
motion.
if you could hear me.
we can hear you.
Okay, great. My internet's down, so now I'm on my little phone,
Uh,
but I'm working on it. I'm getting back.
Okay, any second on the motion?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we pass. Next thing would be new business recommendation, address lot coverage. Doug, you want to handle that one?
Yes, so this is I would classify this as an editorial mistake that has been uncovered. What happened is the Planning Commission, and I have the chronology here, but the Planning Commission reduced the allowable lot coverage for standard lots from 40% to 35%. And that went through council. It was debated. It had a public hearing. Council approved that reduction in lot coverage. Several months after that, you'll recall that the Planning Commission sent forward recommendations on the ordinances dealing with septic systems. And those ordinances sat with City Council for almost 2 years. They then came back after the lot coverage had been reduced, and a part of those changes included the lot coverage again because it got reduced further for lots with septic systems. So the reduction was in there for the septic systems, but it had the original text of 40% for those on sewer. So that had the effect of right after, 2 months after the law was enacted to reduce it to 35%, it undid that change and put it back up to 40%. I've had a little bit of dialogue with Julia about, what level of amendments can be made as an editorial change. Clearly, if you go back and look at the record, the focus of the council at the time was all of the sewer implications. It was not to undo what they had just done with the lot coverage. But I think we agreed that the safest thing would be to go through the process and change it back formally and officially. So it's coming to you all with the plan that from here it would go back to council, have to have another public hearing and 2 more readings, basically redo what had already been done last year. Anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
That's the only alternative, really.
Well, the other alternative would be to deem it as a Scribner's error, which we potentially could, but probably would be less safe
Okay.
if it would ever be challenged.
So anybody applying for a construction permit now can go to the 40%.
No, I have been administering it as 35% because I do think it was just a Scribner's error and not an intentional change. But to be on firm ground, if it ever
Douglas, you froze.
So
Say that again, Bill.
I had a question, Douglas. So this is being put through not as if it had been passed as intended, and this is a correction. You're going through the formal process to correct a clerical error or an error.
Correct. That's
So
how.
your position is it's enforceable as it was intended now, and that this we're buttoning up the process. We're buttoning up going through the process formally.
That's correct.
So Douglas, what do we need to do? Make a
Make a
motion?
recommendation to City Council.
You need a motion for that or something?
Yes.
Motion to recommend to City Council to approve this amended form as written.
Specifically that the allowable lot coverage ratio is going to change from 40 to 35%.
Back to.
I will second Scott's motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Passes. Is that all you need, Doug?
Yes, that's it for that one. Thank you.
Okay. Update on drainage planning.
Okay, I'm gonna Yes, we'll go through the updates. The drainage planning is much as it has been. The engineer believes that everything should be finalized with the smaller projects kind of any minute, and that they are working on putting this out to bid, getting bids back. We had hoped to start this work in July, and I don't know if that, I think that time frame has been bumped a bit by COVID, but that really should be starting very, very shortly. So that's the small projects. The bigger outfall project is still, the request for permits has been filed. We're waiting. We're in a period now of kind of waiting for the permits to be issued for the larger projects. As far as we know, we're on track, everything. We haven't heard of any major hiccups with that, so we think we're on track there. So that's kind of progressing as we had expected, and we would hope that one would start next fiscal year, and it would take about 9 months to complete. So we're tracking that, and we think it's roughly on schedule. The other moving part with drainage is the city council is they have allocated money in next year's budget for a kind of a long range drainage plan, and that's really just a placeholder in the budget right now. So there hasn't been, we've discussed that at the staff level, but there has not been anything more than putting the money into the budget for that effort next fiscal year. I would expect that the Planning Commission would be the lead agency on steering that, kind of much as you were with the outfall project of putting together the request for proposals and grading the proposals. And I would think that you would have a similar role in that project. And we may, before, probably at the onset of that, we may have the discussion to really talk and think about whether or not that is the best use of the money at this point. You know, last year we talked about doing a long-range drainage plan, but the Planning Commission at that time felt like the money would be better spent on actual projects. In talking with the Public Works staff, it seems as though the next likely big projects aren't as obvious as they were at that time, and that maybe we are at a time when we would need a drainage professional to help us identify what the next efforts should be. But I think those are future discussions that once the money is once the budget is passed and we know the amounts that are in there, that we would start working on those projects here shortly.
Douglas, for the 3 outfalls, those will go to bid in the fall of this year, fall of 2020, and start in beginning of January of 2021 to actually do the construction? Yes?
Yes, approximately. You know, the dates I would say are not crystal clear, but that's the schedule that we've been told.
You know, one of the things just off the wall, as we go through the review of the comprehensive plan or the revision of it, revising it, a lot of these questions are going to pop up, and we're not going to have answers yet. It'll be early. For example, what's the next step on drainage? And it's, you know, it's referred to very often in the comprehensive plan. So just something to think about.
Well, and I think that point, you know, your point, Rick, is a good one, and that when you look at the comprehensive plan, and we'll talk about this here shortly, but there clearly was not the focus on drainage the last review of the comprehensive plan that there is. So I think that's going to be a large part of the work that we would need to do.
Yep.
Hey Douglas, what is our role in the bidding process for the project that will go out to bid this fall?
I don't know that there will be much of a role in that. Thomas and Hutton is handling the, they're going to handle getting the bids. And I think that they're probably going to give those bids directly to the committees of city council. I think that that work is kind of, was basically passed on to the council, and it's being pushed through at this point.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to petition the council for us to do a quick pass of it before they get to see it, so we can do a sanity check from our end.
The actual bid documents themselves?
Either that or the offers.
Oh, okay. Review the,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, what would it cost?
that wouldn't be a bad idea. Typically there is some, there's not a tremendous amount of latitude in the language of the code, the procurement code, about, the city basically needs to take the lowest qualified and capable bidder. So unless there's something that really discredits them as qualified, which I would hope that bidding on it wouldn't be, but yeah, I don't think that there's any harm in doing that.
Well, to look at the T's and C's, just to see, to make sure that, to see that we're comfortable with it.
I certainly don't want to overstep any bounds. I'd be interested in looking at the issued for bid documents as well, if that's even possible.
That's publicly available.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good idea.
Prior to the solicitation.
How do you all feel you feel the same way about the small projects? That's kind of, can't remember the amount on it, maybe $200,000 worth of, that's kind of like maybe $20,000 project.
Will they have one contractor do all of those?
It would not work out that way. I mean, it's going to be two different bidding processes. We wanted the small projects to go before the other projects, so it'll be two totally independent projects.
But those 5 may be done by the same contractor.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, all 5 would. I thought you were meaning the outfalls and yes. The intention is that one contractor would do all 5 of the small projects.
Can you help me again? You're saying that the city has to accept the low bid?
So there is some wiggle room in there in semantics in terms of who is a qualified bidder. But if somebody is they do this type of work and they're lower and there's no kind of compelling reason to discount their bid, then the city uses that bidder.
We haven't always done that with the consulting contracts, correct?
So those are a little different, yes.
Okay.
Engineering work and services like that are a little bit different than construction. Is a bit more kind of cut and dry. Go with the lowest person that can do it. But if there's a problem with a bidder, then that should discount their ability.
Plus, the bid packages are pretty detailed.
Yes, extremely. I mean, I anticipate it will be several hundred pages of specifications and details.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, the only thing, with the larger scope project is making sure the bids are completely addressing all the requirements of the bid. And I'm sure staff in all their free time will be love to review that, but that would be something I think we'd be able to assist with.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it's for us to do like a pass through, just to check it out.
Yeah.
There's no cost involved.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with doing that.
And I
Yeah,
think
but
that if I was on council, I'd like to know my planning commission agrees with the package.
I was just gonna add for you guys who may not know, I am an engineer, and I was hoping that was one of the strengths that I could bring to the group. So it's certainly in my wheelhouse, and it would be something that I'd be interested in looking at.
We'll be happy to abuse your talent.
That's great.
Okay, anything else on drainage?
So the only other thing that I would add about drainage is there are a lot of grants out there because of the pandemic. There's a lot of money kind of being put out as available to communities, and we are engaged with basically it's the Thomas and Hutton staff that aligns their projects with the appropriate grants, and we've had several meetings. I don't know that we've identified one yet, but we're kind of analyzing all that are available to try to find one. So we'll continue to work on that with them to see if we can get some help.
So Douglas, this is Scott. Quick question is their role to go find us the grant? Or is our role to go find the grant? I mean, for Thomas and Hutton to go find the grant money?
There is a task in their agreement with us to do that, to go identify grant opportunities, and they are doing that, and they have a staff person dedicated to that. But they're doing. There's a little bit of a cost benefit analysis that we're doing, and so if we were to pursue a grant, there's a chance to do that, and we do try to make a judgment as to whether or not there's a good likelihood of success. So we're doing the city staff with the Thomas and Hutton staff is trying to do that, to make sure that we're not spending money seeking grants that there's a very low probability of being successful in doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was clear in framing the question either. So is it like Thomas and Hutton's going out to look for grant money for a specific project that they're working on? Is there a flip where if there are projects that we would like to work on, are there other efforts in either the administration or in the planning commission to go out and look for grant money?
Unrelated to this project or related to this project?
Unrelated to this project. For other infrastructure projects that maybe come up in the comprehensive plan or otherwise that have been identified that have not been able to been implemented because there's no money.
Well, I mean, if something were to, I don't think that's an active, well, I guess the city hall staff is actively keeping track of grants as they're coming out. So I think we are kind of keeping an eye out. And actually there is funding this year's budget to have grant assistance in-house, because it's challenging to find what grants are available, which grants are available for which projects. So there is supposed to be a staff person added to the staff for that exact purpose.
Okay, that answered my question. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else?
Nothing for me.
Well, I got something for you. MOU.
Here it comes.
Yeah, where are we at?
So, there not a lot of motion, not a lot of traction on the MOU, and I think that it was happening right at the same time as our previous meeting. But the city staff has met with the water and sewer staff about their need to come before. They are still anxious to have the council consider whether or not they will authorize the Water and Sewer Commission to get a bond for the replacement of the Wild Dunes treatment facility. So they have it in their long-range plan to replace that plant. In order to borrow the money to be able to do that, they need to have the blessing of, and they've yet to be able to do that. So that is still a work in progress. We, in the meetings with the Water and Sewer Commission, we expressed interest in having some kind of framework for a working framework between the two, and the starting point would be an MOU. So kind of in a nutshell, there's not been a lot of motion specifically on the MOU, but there are things happening with their need to borrow money.
I guess,
Is that something we want to keep on the agenda for a while?
you read my mind.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? How long is that? When did the MOU effort commence?
2 years ago.
Okay, so I think Vincent's probably going in the right direction. Is this something that can be successful after 2 years if it's simply a memorandum of understanding, or is this essentially a waste of time?
We are at a kind of fork in the road with them needing something from the city, that if we're ever going to get an MOU, we're going to get it now or we're going to get it never. So I would say that, they're feeling squeezed to be cooperative, and we would.
But is it a binding MOU or is it just an MOU?
It's just an MOU.
And I guess I'll just ask the team here, because I'm new and I don't want to be the spoiler of the punch bowl, but what does the MOU do for us as a combined entity? I mean, I think we're trying to work with them, and it seems like this is there another framework, I guess, to get us to where we need with them together versus this path that's been pursued for 2 years unsuccessfully?
Well, we've had a path of meeting with them before. That was less successful than the MOU. So I'm at the point, I'm trying to understand what we can do here. We've tried just about everything. I think it's critical.
Bill, you're on
I
mute.
don't disagree with that. I agree with you, Rick, that it's critical, and it just seems like maybe there's another way to get to the end objective here.
The carrot we have is the bond for the plant expansion. But whether or not we would do that in any case, question.
What do they specifically need from council? Just permission to issue the bond?
Yes, it's done in the form of an ordinance.
But the city doesn't accept any responsibility for it.
Oh, yeah.
That is correct?
That is correct. The city authorizes them to do it, but it's their separate entity. It's entirely on their books. It's not on the city's books. They have to pay it. They have to collect it. There's no, other than just allowing them, giving them permission to do it, there's no other involvement.
So we don't say, so we don't have any option to discuss how it's repaid.
I didn't catch that, Rick.
Okay, we don't have any say as to what changes with regard to rates in order to pay for the bond.
Well, they would have to get approved.
Rates, they have to go through the city as well.
So they'd have to have the rates ready before the bond is issued.
Yes. That, and quite frankly, that has been, when they have approached the city previously, they have not really been able to answer the question clearly as to what the impact to the rates will be once that bond is issued. And I think that they've spent time between their last go around with the city and now with a rate consultant to hopefully be able to better answer those questions. So I think they're going to get that information together before they go back before the city for the bond. And so, Scott, to go back to your question, the item on the agenda has always been an update on the MOU. I would say that the discussion, though, has always been more general than that. And it has been basically what's going on with the Water and Sewer Commission. So I don't know if it maybe, if it's the will of the group to kind of not talk anymore about sewer expansion. I think that's fine. Or if the group enjoys getting kind of a update on what's going on with the Water and Sewer Commission, and we would leave it on there, but maybe retitle the item on the agenda. So either way, I've always felt like the Planning Commission did a lot of work, and it still kind of guides some of your thinking. I mean, that was a point of debate with reducing lot coverage, which was just done at the end of the last year. But if the group is kind of sick of seeing it and would rather revert to a system whereby I would just alert you when something happened instead of having just a recurring item on the agenda, I would
Back to Rick's point, though, is the objective to try to get to a successful memorandum of understanding, whether it's binding or not binding? It sounds like the struggle this is a symptom of the struggle of trying to find a way to work together with the Sewer Commission. So that's really what we're trying to solve for. Maybe an MOU is not the optimal way to do that. And maybe we should find out what is the reason that we have difficulty working together. Being new and not knowing all of that, I don't know. It just seems like seeing an agenda item for 2 years pop up without a result would be more symptom. It's a symptom rather than trying to figure out how do we get to a root cause of working together with these folks. I'd like to see the topic of the sewer on the agenda every meeting. I think it's important. I think I go to you, Douglas, on that. Maybe the MOU is not the way to present it. I don't, just throwing out the suggestions here.
So maybe just update on the Water and Sewer Commission.
Yeah, I think that would be appreciated. I just, we're to a point now where you're trying to define how you're going to work with them going forward. And obviously there's a lot of machinations going on, and it may not be an MOU that is what is your product of all of this. So I think this would be a good topic for discussion every month. But whether it's an MOU or not, I don't know at this point.
Okay.
I agree with Vince. I think the MOU doesn't seem to be the right vehicle. I think it just never got off the ground.
And it's really not much of a document to start with. It's pretty much a let's get along type thing, and you can't even get that.
Exactly.
And it could be, I'm sure Water and Sewer likes their own level of autonomy, but they don't have all that level of autonomy because they do have to answer to council.
Right.
But I don't know what's scaring them. They know our positions, and they've responded in kind. So I don't know why they have such a hard time with a simple letter. But yeah, it's obviously not working, and we all need to move on. It's not going to change the relationship, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, so back to this idea of if we're ever going to get any written understanding between the two of us about sharing information, having open channels of communication, talking to each other regularly, that type of written agreement, I do think this is the only time that we're ever going to get that. So I guess I have a little bit of I don't know, I guess I have a reservation of right kind of at the finish line.
You want to push it over the line?
I agree. We ought to get that letter signed. This because if nothing else, it's the power game, and the council should have the upper hand.
Why don't we,
Nicholas, how much effort have we put into this recently?
So it comes up in passing frequently. Anytime the staffs meet together, we've met together in the last month, and it came up. So anytime we get together, we talk about it.
Amongst yourselves or with people at the sewer commission? Who are
Well-
when you say we talk about it, who are you talking with?
It's typically with the staff. I mean, they do, it's typical also that they include a commissioner and the staff. And I don't, honestly, and personally, I don't think it's that they have heartache with the language in the MOU. I think it's just down on their priority list. It just doesn't kind of bubble up to the top to get their focused attention to get dealt with. And then in the middle of it, they have a tremendous amount of staff turnover and things get shuffled. So I don't think that it's that they object to it. I think I would kind of classify it as something that they just haven't really gotten to in the last couple of years.
Have they ever come to a meeting with
That's 2
for
years.
the planning commission and tell us what the issues are?
No. I mean, they have attended planning commission meetings, but never have they come back and said, we object to this point, that point, and the other.
Would it be helpful to just have their leadership come and tell us what's the angst and just have an open forum conversation with them about it or is that not the relationship we have?
In my term on the planning commission, they have never attended a meeting.
Should we
Their
extend?
staff has, but none of the commissioners.
None of the
Some-
commissioners, staff only.
Well,
And again, I don't know exactly. I'm trying to understand the role of the planning commission here as I get into this, but typically, I mean, wouldn't it be prudent to have some of their counterparts come talk to us and find out what the issue is, or is that not how it's done? Have an open conversation. If we're trying to figure out and speculate what the reason is for not signing an MOU, if they don't have the time to even get to the MOU to sign it, how are they going to have time to implement the terms and conditions of the MOU? This would be my thought process.
the terms are pretty loose. I mean, it truly is just, we're going to share kind of information and work together collaboratively. We had hoped.
Maybe that's the question that should be asked to them. What is the issue of pushing back on that? And maybe we can figure out a way collectively to overcome it. Just a suggestion.
Well, one of the things we tried to do was portray this MOU as a critical path item on their road to expansion. And we thought that would kind of motivate them to say, okay, we got to get through this. We got to get through this barricade or barrier in order to get to the next step. Nothing happened. I mean, in my opinion, I think we're better off just laying low on this thing and letting it go for now. That's just a thought.
I guess the only other thing I can think of is what is their urgency on the bond getting approved? I imagine they want to get that done now,
Yes.
and maybe tying it to that bond approval. If we can get council to do that, to say, you know, the only way we can approve this, and I'm sure they're working through it, or as part of our approval, you need to sign off on our working relationship going forward. I mean, that may be the only other way to do this.
That's been kind of my thought. And I think that's kind of how we're, informally proceeding with, at some point, they're going to need to come make a firm pitch as to what they want. And I think at that time we say, okay, well, in exchange for that, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think I do think that time is of the essence with this bond. They, from what I hear, the facility in Wild Dunes is really kind of limping along on its last leg, and they delayed it last year. And I think that they're pretty, I think they're going to be focused on it in the coming months.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what do you think, Doug? We kind of put it there as an FYI.
I think so. I think if there's going to be motion, there's going to be more motion on this in the next few months than there has been in 2 years. So I would say you've dealt with it for this long.
Leave it there.
Leave it there for a couple more months, see what happens.
Yep, that's
Like a good wine, right?
yeah, right.
Okay. Any other comments on that one? Okay, Doug, you want to lead us off on the comprehensive plan review?
Well, so we've got update on the short-term. These will be very quick. So before we get there,
Oh.
the short-term rental recommendations are making their way through City Council. And the Public Safety Committee met and basically took away, they took away the need. Oh. Somebody, I think, is somebody sharing their screen, or is that?
Oh yeah, that was me. Sorry.
That might be appropriate.
That's okay. We might need that.
Yeah. Sorry.
The Public Safety Committee there was a few, which I would call kind of smaller parts of that recommendation that dealt with making it illegal to even advertise a short-term rental. And then secondly, requiring that they post the license number in their advertisements. And then there was a third portion on revocation, which the Planning Commission recommended that a revocation process begin as soon as there's 5 founded complaints. There was a legal opinion given that basically the way it's written now and the way it's recommended is that a license would be suspended by me pending a hearing. And if somebody had a suspended license, they couldn't rent their house during that time. And I think that the legal advice is going to be that that is taking away their ability to run their business without any due process at all. So I think that there's going to be a change there that would say that the suspension not take place until City Council. Instead of me doing it, that would go to City Council and be an actual hearing. So there would be some due process. So there were a few minor, what I would call kind of minor tweaks made by their recommendation. And they have sent that to City Council. And once those modifications are made in the draft of the text, I will send them back. That just happened last week, that meeting. So it hasn't been forwarded to council, but I will, and it will then go to full council for 2 readings and a public hearing. So during that time, I will reroute the public safety's version of the ordinance back to you all for your review. And if you wouldn't need to change your recommendation, but if there's something there that causes heartache, you could certainly let it be known at that point. So it's basically working its way through the council process now with fairly minor modifications.
Douglas, I didn't understand what you meant, but they said they couldn't advertise the rental at all. What does that mean?
So we had it in there. We had a provision that required that their advertisement included their license number.
But they could still advertise.
They could, yes.
Okay.
Under our recommendation, they would have to include their number in their advertisement, but they could still advertise. But they would have to have that number there so anybody looking could easily identify whether or not it had an accurate a license.
And they took that out?
They took that out. Their rationale was we don't require that of any other type of business license, that it struck them as, punitive to one group of operators over a different group.
You know, one of the reasons we did that is because Charleston City was doing that. Do you know, are they still requiring that?
Yes, City of Charleston does require that. That's where we got it.
But we will not.
That's the recommendation of public safety, was that we would not.
And where do you stand on the software that you acquired that was going to help with identifying short-term rentals and some of the administrative burdens? Has that ever been implemented?
Yes, it has. And I can tell you, it has not helped with the administrative burdens. It has added new layers of burdens on the staff. So I'll, as a kind of quick recap, it did identify about 100 properties as being on basically marketing without a license. And we have sent letters to all 100. And some of them truly were not, some of them needed a license and didn't have one, and they're getting licenses. Others, the software misidentified. So we're kind of getting a mixed bag of success. And, you know, it may end up being 50 or so that it actually finds. It is, the software is pretty impressive, though, I will say. It gives basically proof that somebody has stayed there, that it's been actually rented without a license. When it catches them, it truly catches them, which is good. So it has been good. It has generated, you can imagine these are the people who are avoiding getting a license, and so they're not happy when they get caught, as you could probably admit. So I think it's been good, though. It's been a good process. We will have to make a decision. You'll recall that software was, I think it was about 13 or 14,000. They have forewarned us that to go forward next year, it's going to be more in the neighborhood of 50,000 per year. So we're keeping close tabs on the amount of money that the additional licenses will generate for us. It's not going to be 50,000, but it could ultimately just broadcast to the world that you really cannot get away with renting without a license. Any questions about that?
From here.
All right, last update is just the strategic plan. And I would just say that this has been endorsed by City Council. It's budget for the upcoming year. I think it's going to kick off fairly soon. And I think that it will be a pretty important part of forming some of the direction in the comprehensive plan. So all things are appearing to be fully on track and moving forward. Any questions on that one?
Well, the only comment, I have a comment, that is that I don't think we should wait for that. I think we have to get on with the comprehensive plan on our own, and then meld it in or blend it in when the time is right or when they're ready for it. There's a lot of things that need to be corrected. Things have changed considerably, right? We've got to update it as best we can. And when the strategic plan is starting to formalize, then we'll take a look at ours and see what we need to do to change it, make it fit. That's my feeling about it.
Yeah, I would agree. There's plenty of work that can be done during and even prior to the strategic plan. And hopefully, I think it will be good because I think the planning commission is going to be involved. They haven't been hired yet formally, so I don't know exactly what their, what their process is going to be, but I do working with the planning commission. So I think it'll be good to be going on in tandem.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
No, I'm good.
Vince, you good?
Yep.
Okay. You want to start us off, Doug?
Yes, I don't know. So we have been talking about starting in earnest on the comprehensive plan now for 4 or 5 months, and various things have happened that have kept us from doing that. And I don't know what the appetite of the group is to really begin. I have my personal thoughts on how we might proceed. And I'd be happy to kind of share those with you, or if you want to get your own ideas about how to proceed, we can do that. Or I don't know, Rick, I know that, Rick, you had some thoughts about how to do it.
Well, the only comment I like your strategy. I like your approach. I think you need to be the one to give us some guidance here. The only thing I brought up was that it would be nice to plant in some breakpoints. In other words, if we start now and say, okay, we're going to go until midnight, I'll probably get through 60 or 70 pages. I think if we cut it into pieces, well thought out pieces, then every time we have a meeting, we could do a piece and know that there'll be a beginning and an end, rather than trying to work through it until we can't work anymore.
Yeah, I think that's true, that we would want to break it into pieces. I would just say that generally, and we've talked a little bit about the things that are out there or in the works that we don't have yet, that we would like reflected in the planning commission, in the comprehensive plan. In my mind, we would do as Rick has suggested and work on bits and pieces. I guess I would suggest that we identify those elements, those sections that we know we're going to need to wait on for other information. And an example of that would be, we're waiting on the census. That's clearly going to play heavily into the population element. So we might decide to delay on the population element till we have all. Another element is the economic element. I personally feel like a lot of the focus of the strategic plan could play into the economic element. So I might suggest that we delay work on that a bit until we see the direction of the strategic plan. To me, the glaring things that the plan is short on are drainage, and I think the drainage, sewer, and parking. To me, those would fall into natural resources, transportation, probably those two most squarely, and community facilities to some extent. So I think that if I were to propose a direction forward, focus incorporating those bigger projects that the Planning Commission has been focusing on for years, and work those into those 3 elements at this point. While we're doing that, I think that the census information should come available and the strategic plan should get underway, so that maybe it would work out where we're kind of finishing updating those elements while those other pieces are getting wrapped up or we at least know which direction they're going to go, and then we could turn our focus on the population and the economic sections at that point. In our conversation, Scott and Marty and I met yesterday, and Scott had a good suggestion of maybe at the onset pulling out the goals and strategies as as kind of a list of bullets to see what how we felt about those at this point. And some of them may not be goals or strategies any longer for various reasons, either they've been done or they shouldn't be done. So that was a suggestion that I thought was a good one. And I think he's volunteered to do some administrative work on that too, which if you do that, you're destined to be poured onto. So any other thoughts about how to kind of eat the elephant? And I don't know how you all feel about, I personally, I guess I prefer kind of sitting around a table, hashing things out. I feel like it's not, for whatever reason, it is not as collaborative via Zoom or virtual meeting. So I don't know when we're going to meet again in person. I mean, I think we're as a city, we are hopeful that it will begin in July. But that kind of remains to be seen, and maybe we're getting worse instead of better at this point. So maybe.
Is it something that perhaps next month, let me get a little closer. Is it something that maybe sometime after the 4th of July, the group would be up for getting into a room, so properly socially distanced and all, and having a work session on the comprehensive plan? Having it be, you could facilitate it or whatever, and we could before we get to that meeting, maybe identify the pieces. You identified 3, the natural resources, community facilities, and transportation. That represents probably over half the goals and well over half of the strategies that are in the current plan. So that's a big chunk of what's on the plate as it is now. Would the team be up for getting together and having a work session on the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
It suits me. Does the city have any restrictions against our committees meeting face to face?
Not that I'm aware of. I think if the group chose to do so, that we could. I don't think there's anything that technically keeps us from being.
Now, you see putting the actual document together. Who's going to do the actual drafting of it? Who did it before?
So it's been done different ways. I mean, we have actually divvied up elements to different planning commissioners. The last couple of times I have done it with the guidance of the planning commission.
Is there a chance we could have it professionally prepared?
And that's really that probably is the starting point for the discussion. I mean, never has a planning commission wanted to basically pay to have it done. And I think we're one of the few communities that don't have it professionally done. They are, they're typically expensive to have done. I know that some communities have asked for the Council of Governments help, and I know that they do it at kind of a discounted rate. But that's a good question. I mean, I think if that's certainly I don't think we have any money in the budget to do it, but as long as it wasn't an astronomical amount, I think that the money could probably be found.
Bill, until that money is found or whatever, I think we could collaborate on, say, a Word document that gets passed around with version control. And I think Marty was talking a little bit about this yesterday, but I mean, if some of us have some bandwidth to be the scribe and take the inputs and collect them up and take it from everybody and then redistribute out for review, I don't know how, Douglas, you could do that with your day job on a 71-page document the way that is. Not to mention gather up all the data. I think we need to probably get some administrative support out of our team here somehow in the interim. Do you agree? I mean, I'm willing to volunteer some time.
Yeah. So I would say that in my opinion, the time that the document did get split up among various authors, that I think that, and it's just mainly personal, it was fine, but you could read the document and tell that it had been written by 14 different people.
7 different people, yeah.
It was tough to keep it all consistent, in a consistent format. So there was some challenges to that.
I guess where I would go is if we had a working session, for example, and everybody's sending out the inputs, all the team members putting out the inputs, one of us gets assigned to take the notes on it, collect it, put a redraft together, and get it back out to everybody. So the conversation and the conclusions that come out of the group are kind of decided at the meeting, so that everybody's on the same page of what would go into the document. Then it becomes more of a scribing exercise. So then you don't end up with 14 different authors per se. You have a consensus that gets drafted into the agreement for everybody to review.
Yeah, that has, the last couple of times I would say that's kind of how it worked. We would focus on an element as a group. We would talk about where we thought it was weak, where, what needed to be taken out. And we would just talk through that element. And then at the next meeting, a draft of that element would be provided by me. And then you would brainstorm on the next element. So you'd kind of be looking at, you'd be looking forward on one element and then editing last month's work on the other element. And I think that, to me, that worked fairly well. It's kind of up to you all how you want to do it.
Is there any participation by council?
No, not in the preparation. I mean, it does ultimately go to them. And I do think that with this particular version, which will be unique, it's going to be tied into this strategic plan, which will be really the work of city council. So I think that this one will be more tied to city council and their work than it has historically been. What do you think, Bill? Are you in terms of farming it out? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think we could put the draft together, but I'd like to see it look nice, have a nice appearance once it's finished, and that takes somebody with some professional ability to do that, and put some graphs in there and some pictures. Was the beach management plan done professionally?
Yes.
It looks like it.
Yes. So your concern is more kind of aesthetic.
Oh, cosmetic to some degree, sure.
User friendly, so people will read it and look at it, and I like that idea, Bill. That's good.
With hot links.
I can scribe. I can't make pretty arts and charts very well.
We don't know how much the beach management plan costs, do we?
We're actually, I can get that. I think it was 40,000.
Oh.
Wow.
I think we can do better than that.
Well, that's more than we're paying for the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, most cities, it's upwards of 100,000.
For the comprehensive plan to get prepared?
The comprehensive plans which is, I think, the reason why we've always done it in-house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe we just get Folly Beach and copy it.
There are a lot of talented people on the island that could probably help us and wouldn't mind volunteering sometime too.
I'd be happy to. I'll echo what Scott said. I've got some tools that would be useful. some professional.
Yeah, as long as the data's there that we need. And I did have one, it's a little bit of a question, Douglas. You talked about the population. Do we have the information on the resident sites without the census? So the total, the single family, the rentals, seasonal, all that?
There are parts of that graph that, or that matrix that is completely from the building department data that we could, I can't pick them out in my, I'm not looking at the page right now, so I can't pick them out of my, but I think to your point, a lot of that information is not census. It's generated by our data.
Yeah.
So just to back up a minute, the comprehensive, the beach management plan, the author of that plan sent an email that his cost to put it together was $42,000 last year, or last time it was done. But he only charged $20,000, but we are budgeting $40,000 to redo it. So I think it would be, I think.
But that includes all the data gathering and preparation and analysis, and it's not just preparing the document. It's the content as well. Yeah.
He does all of that.
Okay, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, but what we're talking about doing is handing them something that we've worked on that somebody, just like Bill said, can clean up and make maybe something different.
I think that would be considerably less. I mean, we did have the maps, the graphics that are in our current plan. One was done by Charleston County GIS. One was done by the COG. So, we've had some kind of map making assistance in the past, but I think that cleanup and aesthetics could be much cheaper.
Yeah, and Scott, I like your idea of doing that in a meeting where we actually, someone takes the notes and hands them off, and then we can type it onto a draft, and then that gets presented the next week or next month, and then we use that as a working document till we get all of our input into it, and then have somebody clean it up.
Absolutely.
I like that process.
All right. So I think I can put together basically a schedule of how we're, as I understand it, we would kind of prioritize the various elements. And I think I'm hearing that we talk about them in one meeting. We would get thoughts as to how it should look. Then at the next meeting, we would potentially have kind of a draft of that. And we will prioritize them and work through them element by element, with the idea that at the end of that, we will get help with making it look pretty.
Yep.
Generally, is that what we're talking about? And
That's what I like.
Yeah.
all right. So how about for next month, we will have, assuming that we're going to be meeting together, and I guess we'll do it either way, even if we don't, we'll have a schedule of rough schedule of how we're going to proceed. And then we will have everybody be okay with the natural resources being the first element we tackle in a brain session next
Great.
month.
Sure.
What would your order be, Douglas, if you had all three? Natural resources first, what would be second? And is the big one seems to be, because there are 9 goals and 25 strategies in that community facility section.
Yeah, I think it would be, and this is kind of out of clear blue, natural resources, then community facilities, and then transportation. Okay. But if we wanted to do a different order, I mean, that's literally how they're on the page in front of me. So but I think we could do it if there was a different order that you wanted. We could do it in any order. I would just want to save the population, the economic section, housing section till later.
Sounds good.
All right. I think we have consensus there.
What about priority investment?
So that's an element that was kind of crowbarred in by the legislature. It may have been the last version. We'll talk about it, but it is we have historically found that it's a tool that the legislature wanted to identify kind of poor communities within a large community that needed projects done. And I don't, it just hasn't really, we'll talk about the details of that section, but that section has not been terribly important to the comprehensive plan historically.
Okay,
It could be. I mean, it could certainly morph into something that is more meaningful.
you run by one more time what the takeaway is, or what the to-dos are.
Okay, so next meeting, we're going to review a schedule of how we're going to approach it. Generally, that schedule is going to be brainstorm on,
Excuse me, could that be done by email prior to the next meeting?
the schedule.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes, it could.
that would save us a month.
Okay.
A meeting cycle.
Yes. So that won't delay. So at our next meeting, though, we will review the natural resources section
Yep.
in a brainstorming kind of methodology that we talk about what we want to add to it.
Yep.
Then at the next meeting, you will be given a draft of what you discussed at the prior meeting for that element, and then we will brainstorm the next element on the list. And then we're going to go through the plan in that format where we review and edit of one section and then brainstorm on the next section until we've gotten through it.
Sounds good.
Can I ask to add, well, I'll just throw this out as an idea. Would it be helpful before we dive into the sections to just have a quick conversation or a 5-minute discussion validating that the vision statement still, all the components of the vision statement are still valid, so that since that's going to guide every one of these sections, should we just have some conversation around the validation of the vision statement and the adjustments?
So that's a good idea. Let's make the vision statement and the entire introduction our kickoff for our next meeting.
Natural resources, yeah.
Yes, those I'll call them 3 different components: introduction, vision statement, and natural resources.
Yep. Works for me.
Sounds good.
Can I just ask if because I think that I think July is going to be a kind of a bizarre month for the city, in that this kind of getting out of virtual meeting. And I am wondering if we will not try to morph into a situation where at least some people meet physically in a room, and then others do, if you would like to attend virtually, would do that. Does that sound reasonable to people, or do you feel like, or you want to make kind of a game time decision the week before, or what?
Why don't we give people the option, Douglas, so that if people are comfortable meeting, they can, and if they aren't and want to meet virtually still, it's an option.
So, and I don't know, I'm going to have to run this through the administration to be sure that we're
It's okay.
compliant with FOIA requirements and everything else. But that is kind of what I was hoping for. I will say that the Forest Trail subdivision, which was so contentious at preliminary review, they are currently doing their they've gotten approval from the county for their stormwater, and they're installing the infrastructure there, and they will need to come back for final approval. And I do think that that's, probably going to happen in July.
Okay.
That those residents, would be very interested in being able to voice a concern.
I can imagine.
I'm a little anxious about the idea of handling kind of important business virtually that people can't provide comment for. So I think one way or another, I would like to transition to meeting in person in July. And I just wanted to kind of get the sense from you all if you would be agreeable. And we'll have to work through how, because as you'll remember, the preliminary approval of that subdivision, there was a packed house that we couldn't do that. But if we set the room up and had kind of controls in place to be sure that people could be spaced out, they could give their comments in a safe manner, I think that would be good.
Can you use council chambers for that?
Yes.
Not the rec center.
It would be good to use a larger room if we know we're going to have.
We can use
Yes, I think that would be a good idea to give us a little more space.
I think you're gonna have more people than you can fit in the city hall. I think the rec center would probably be the better place to do it.
Yeah, might be. I mean, I guess I had not envisioned everybody being able to be in the room at once. Where you may kind of sign up and be called in to make a comment. Maybe there would be some audience members able to fit into the room, kind of first come, first serve on sitting inside the room, but at least allowing everybody that wanted to speak an opportunity to come in, say what they wanted to say, and then they potentially would have to leave.
But we also have that ability like council's doing where they can submit their comments also.
Yes. Yeah. And, I personally, it's not I feel like the public input is lost a little bit there. So it's not my personal preferred way to do it, but I guess if we have to, we'd have to do it that way. But that would certainly be an option, but I would like to have the option of speaking in person as well.
Just one other question. This is imminent. Is this something that would be easy to obtain the pertinent meeting minutes on the previous discussions?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We are fully up to speed for something.
Yes. Yeah, and I can also, because it gets fairly detailed in its in the specifications of that request, but I can forward everything that's happened. I can give you the minutes, and then I can forward everything that's happened since then, which is all of the the county's approval, the various utilities approval of various components of that subdivision. So I'll put those out sooner rather than later, so you can spend time with them.
That'd be fantastic.
And have you seen their drainage plan that was submitted to the county?
Yes, I have.
Can we get copies of that in
Yep.
advance?
Rick, I think that's all I have. I don't know if anything else.
I don't have anything else. I make a motion to end the meeting.
I will so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's it.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. In July. Thank you.
Great job again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.